Ya, selamat pagi semuanya. Semua bisa mendengar suara saya dengan jelas ya? Nanti jika ada masalah, bisa langsung chat ke chat box-nya International Office. Nanti mungkin akan bisa kami bantu dari sini. So, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me clearly? If you have troubles, probably with your technical problems, you can chat us on International Office chat box. You can see it there. Ya, 5 menit lagi kita akan mulai ya. Dan sebelum mulai saya akan bacakan dulu aturan untuk tanya jawabnya. Sebenarnya sudah dikirim instruksinya di email link yang kami kirimkan sebelumnya, tapi akan saya ulangi lagi. Jadi nanti Q&A sessions akan secara chat. Jadi silahkan nanti kalau mau bertanya, silahkan chat di chat box-nya International Office dengan format nama, institutions atau country, lalu langsung aja ke pertanyaannya. Nanti setelah itu kami akan bacakan pertanyaannya kepada pembicaranya. Dan mungkin kalau mau lebih spesifik, dikasih pertanyaan ini akan diaddress ke speaker yang mana, seperti itu. Yeah. So before we start, I would like to explain a bit how you can talk to us during the webinar. So if you have any questions during the presentations, just write them to the Zoom chat box, International Office chat box with the format your name, your institutions or country, and your questions. And probably if you need to be more specific, you can add which speaker to which speaker your questions is addressed to. All right. If you have trouble, I would like to remind you once more that if you have problems, you can chat us here at the International Office chat box. So probably we will help you from here. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the international webinar, The Impact of COVID-19 Pandemic on Higher Education. Thank you all for finding time and visiting today's webinar. This webinar is hosted by the International Office of Universitas Sebelas Maret, UNS. My name is Safitri Polakadisma, Staff for International Mobility Program here at UNS International Office. And I'll be taking the role of moderator today. So we already have 4 great speakers with us today who will share and discuss on how COVID-19 pandemic has affected universities, especially all over the world. Now, today's webinar will be opened by the Rector of UNS, Professor Jamal Wiwoho, and will be followed by presentations from the 4 speakers. But before we start, let me explain how you can talk to us during the webinar. If you have any questions during the presentations, just write them to the Zoom chat box in International Office chat box, and we will have the Q&A sessions at the end of the presentations to answer all your questions. All right, now without a further ado, I would like to invite the Rector of UNS, Professor Jamal Wiwoho, to open this webinar. Professor Wiwoho, floor is yours.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Respectable Mr. Johnson Ong Chee from AUN-QA expert, Mr. Strods from QS Market Research and Data Manager, Professor Arifin Angriawan from Purdue University Northwest USA, Professor Sajidan from UNS, and all participants of this international webinar who are not only coming from Indonesia, but also from other countries, including Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, Myanmar, and Malaysia. On behalf of Universitas Sebelas Maret, it is great pleasure for us to welcome you to international webinar on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on higher education. As we have witnessed, the new coronavirus, COVID-19, has been spreading all over the world. It has infected almost 4 million people with the spreading all the world. And has infected 4 million people with the global death rate is around 6%. It is much massive than the previously outbreak such as swine flu, H1N1, Ebola, SARS, and MERS. The World Health Organization has announced in the mid of March 2020 that COVID-19 has become a global pandemic. Many countries have therefore respected by implementing some policies including social distancing, physical distancing, monument control, or even lockdown to restrain the transmittal of this virus. The International Monetary Fund has also declared that the COVID-19 outbreak has led to a global economic crisis and recession. Moreover, its economic impact is considered to extend to global financial crisis in 2008, even though this pandemic is ongoing with an eventual scale of the disaster still unknown. This pandemic has by all means impacted most sectors in our life, including higher education that most of involved in. Many business processes in the university have to suddenly change in responding to the pandemic and subscribe movement policies. Most courses are taught with online system. Moreover, course exam, thesis, and dissertation defense, graduation, routine meeting, and many other activities should also be adjusted with as a quiet challenge for university to adapt. Therefore, the seminar attended by more than 400 participants. It's decided to providing from a forum to discuss the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the current practices in higher education and eventually on the future of higher education itself. In this occasion, we fortunately have more experts in this fight. Mr. Johnson Ong Chee is a very well-known expert in quality assurance of higher education, particularly in the Southeast region. Mr. Strods is the market research and data manager of the KS Quality Center, as well-respected organization assessing the quality of higher education institution. We also have Professor Arifin Angriawan, a full professor of strategic management at Purdue University, Northwest USA. We can learn from him on how US university respond to this outbreak. Lastly, our Vice Rector, Professor Sajidan, will also discuss some mitigation action that have been done by our university. Our university has committed to contribute in the development of education particularly and the Industrial Revolution 4.0 era, not only at the national level, but also in the regional on international environment, as we are fully aware that in today's globalization world, contribution of higher education institutional should be promoted to a wider spectrum. Finally, let me reiterate that we strongly expect that this forum will be beneficial from you all, and again, we thank you very much for participating in this international webinar. Good morning. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Jamal Wiwoho, for the opening speech. And now let's move to the presentation sessions. But before that, let me introduce you to the 4 distinguished speakers today. So the first speakers, we have Mr. Johnson Ong. He's an AUN-QA expert from Education Quality International Singapore. Mr. Ong has more than 35 years of operational, quality, and human resource management. His expertise evolved from specializing in quality of product and service to the quality of life. And our second speaker is Professor Arifin Angriawan. He got his PhD in business administration from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. Hello, Professor. His areas of expertise are competitive strategy development, business model development, and top management teams. And currently, he serves as Professor of Strategic Management at Purdue University, Northwest USA. And our third speaker is Mr. Strods. Hi, Chris. He's a market research and data manager from QS. His educational background is in both computer science and psychology. And Chris is responsible for the productions of the QS International Student Survey and Domestic Student Survey. It's the world's largest survey of prospective international and domestic students. And our last speakers, the fourth speaker is Professor Sajidan. Selamat pagi, Prof. Professor Sajidan is a full professor at the Department of Biology, Faculty of Teacher Training and Education here in UNS. He holds a PhD degree in bacterial genetics from Humboldt University, Berlin. And Professor Sajidan has more than 29 years of teaching experience at the university level. And currently, he serves as UNS Vice Rector for Planning and Partnerships. All right, so those are our speakers for today's webinar. And now let's go on to the first presentations by Mr. Johnson Ong. Mr. Johnson Ong, floor is yours.
Thank you, MC. So let me bring up my presentation. A very good morning to the Rector of UNS, Professor Jamal, honorable speakers, and participants of the webinar. This morning, I'll be discussing and sharing about the quality of online higher education, the new normal. So let me share with you what I'll be covering for this morning. My presentation will cover 3 key areas. First, the 4th wave of COVID-19 disruption. Second, the disrupted education. And finally, what will be the new normal? Let me start off with the 4th wave of COVID-19 disruption that have affected education. The first is public health disruption. During the pandemic, I think most of the country public health gone into an emergency. We see many of the capacities and the efficiency and effectiveness of healthcare is being tested. We see a rush of time for us to beat the pandemic. China built its 1,000-bed hospital in just 10 days. We can also see a short supply of ventilators, personal protective equipment. There was a huge increase in COVID-19 tests, and we see the speed of coming out with a COVID-19 vaccine in order to overcome the pandemic. The second disruption is social disruption. We see many countries started with a lockdown and social distancing. We see a total of 3.9 billion people involving 42 countries have been locked down due to the pandemic. About 68 to 81% of employment were actually locked down, and many of the employees have to work from home. Social distancing has been a practice in all establishments, including higher education. What you see in the picture there is actually an exam in South Korea, where social distancing is being practiced. The last picture that you see here is a very interesting love story. This old couple, which are about 80 over years old, one from Germany and one from Denmark. And they actually meet every day at the border. In order to overcome this social distancing, they bring with them to celebrate every day. Love is something that keeps distance away. The third way of disruption is economic disruption. And due to the lockdown, we see a crash in the stock market around the world. Many of the key sectors were actually affected by the pandemic, in particularly related to tourism and travel, airlines, and retail. GDP is estimated to reduce from 1.2% to about 1.9%. Unemployment rate is expected to be about 20 over million around the world. The last wave of disruption is technology disruption. We can see there was a significant change in the way that how people communicate. We see a huge increase in video conferencing, in video chat applications. We can also see an explosion of many of the applications relating to video calls, online conferences, healthcare, social media, and also in terms of media and entertainment, as people had to stay at home. We see a huge increase in video conferencing software, in particular relating to Zoom platform and also Google Classroom, partly because of the push toward online education due to the pandemic. So these are the four waves that have disrupted education. How education has been disrupted. Now let's take a look at the lockdown. It is estimated about 1.4 billion students were actually locked away from school. School was out for them, and many of them had to stay at home. We could also see from this survey from QS, about 60% of the study plan abroad were actually disrupted. Many of the students would prefer to defer their study plan in going abroad because of the pandemic. We can also see another survey from QS. It basically show us that almost about 70% of events are going online, whether it's a virtual open house or whether it's a graduation ceremony. A study was also carried out in terms of how universities react to the pandemic. And 50% have responded in switching face-to-face lesson into online teaching. Similar survey was also carried out by AACSB. On average, 51% of the respondents have converted face-to-face courses into virtual learning. In Asia Pacific, this was even much greater, about 67% had converted to virtual learning. What will be the new normal be? There are basically three scenarios that we can see how the pandemic going to develop. First, it probably could be resolved by fall 2020 in a very optimistic perspective. Or it could be continued until January 2021 and come to the worst scenario, it probably will become to the end of 2021. So the pandemic will keep us probably for the next 1 to 2 years, depending on the development of the vaccine and the way that how countries have controlled the spread of COVID-19 cases. So in this new normal, what do we need, especially where 50% of face-to-face learning have converted to virtual learning? We need to have a framework to safeguard the quality of education. In this framework, we will discuss the various factors involved in ensuring and assuring quality of higher education on the virtual learning. The first is educational philosophy. The educational philosophy basically relates what and how students should be taught, about the purpose of education, about the role of teacher. I think it's important for university to review its university educational philosophy in the new normal. In this pandemic, as well as after the pandemic, how are we going to educate our students? And what will be the role of our teacher in the new normal? The second factor is program and learning outcome. I think the quality of curriculum will not change much due to the pandemic, but it's always important for us to make sure that the curriculum relates to the skill that company needed in the future. These are the top 5 skill and hard skill that was basically based on the survey from LinkedIn Learning. Another survey by World Economic Forums highlight the key skill needed in the future. And many of these key skills are basically related to innovation. Similar survey was also carried out at McKinsey. We highlight the important and growing future skill, in particular relating to advanced IT, critical thinking, leadership, creativity, project management, and technological design. So it is critical that our curriculum need to be aligned to the future skill needed by the company so that our graduate can be future ready. In designing our online education, we need to look at the learning design. And in learning design, there are 3 factors. The first factor is learning methods. Learning method basically relate to how individual groups and communities can actually learn. This was a study that was carried out during the pandemic in China. And from this particular diagram, we can see how individual groups and community can actually learn in helping to achieve low order thinking skill and high order thinking skill through the different ways that learning can take place. The second factor under learning design is learning environment. It's important for university to maintain some degree of engagement and motivation for students to learn. Another study that was carried out in China during the pandemic and found this to be very important factors in creating a positive, conducive experience for students. 2 weeks ago, I and my colleagues conducted an online learning on self-assessment report writing. And in our SAR writing online training, we actually conducted a survey on the success factors. We basically look at some of these factors, and the respondent highlight the importance of these factors for successful online learning. Pre-workshop instructions are critical to help learners to be prepared for online learning. It's also important for us to create a conducive and friendly environment for learning, as well as having a structured and easy to follow lesson plan. Discussion and interaction are equally important to ensure learning takes place. The third factor under learning design is learning assessment. In learning assessment, it's important for us to hold holistic and authentic assessment at every phases of learning, before lesson, during lesson, as well as after lesson. The flipped classroom concept provides a very good framework for us in designing online learning, where asynchronous and synchronous learning could take place in achieving low order thinking skill as well as high order thinking skill. Next is academic integrity. I think this is particularly important, especially in online learning. A survey was carried out and it showed that high degrees of action taken by faculty members are related to academic integrity. So it is important for us to how to address this particular issue to ensure academic integrity. There were cases of exam cheating in Singapore, for example, the National University of Singapore and US. And I think it's important for universities to take precaution measures against cheating on online examination to maintain academic integrity. Next is technology and infrastructure. And that basically presents one of the key factors for successful online learning. In technology, we can see these are some of the trends that are likely to happen in the future, where 41% rely very much on artificial intelligence and machine learning, 39% on VR and AR, 30% on social learning, as well as data on learner habits and preferences, as well as gamification. So we can see that university is likely to use some of this technology in the future for online education. Technology can be classified into different types, but there are two key categories of technology that can be used in online education. In general, synchronous learning and asynchronous learning. And I think each of these have its advantages and disadvantages. And I think it's important for us to have an integrated synchronous and asynchronous learning. Another survey that was carried out at Beijing Normal University during the pandemic, and it showed how synchronous learning can be applied, in particular to replace face-to-face environment. Asynchronous instruction could actually help to complement synchronous learning, where students can learn at their own pace. The uses of technology is equally important in how online education can be designed. In general, we can make use of 4 key areas in terms of technology. One is substitution, augmentation, modification, as well as redefinition of technology. Lastly, the design of technology in order to give the student a positive learning experience. These are 5 key areas that we need to ask ourselves in terms of desirability, usability, adaptability, comfortability, as well as value in meeting the expected program and learning outcomes. Infrastructure. We need to ensure the accessibility, connectivity, and reliability of the network. There was a research done on the impact of online learning on disadvantaged students in Australia by Victoria University. The research found that there was a deep drop in learning in some of the key areas related to numeracy, mathematics, reading, and English language. The research basically highlighted the importance of accessibility, connectivity, and reliability of network to disadvantaged students. It's important for students or for universities to ensure equity of accessibility to online learning. Now, privacy and securities are important because online learning may hold some personal information that relate to the university, teachers, as well as the student. So it's important that the network that we use, the platform that we use for online teaching are secure. And lastly, it's about digital resources and tools. A digital ecosystem could be required to ensure a holistic, integrated online education, from planning to teaching to assessment, and of course to improvement. The last factor is about support services provided, both to the faculties, the students, as well as to other stakeholders that may be involved in online learning. On faculty, they need to understand about pedagogical characteristics in designing online education. These were some of the factors based on the research on online education and adult learning, new frontiers for teaching practices. And they have identified some of these key characteristics that are important for consideration in the design of online learning. Technology and remote supports are equally important. A survey was done by Insider Higher Education, and these are some of the information and assistance that could be required for faculty members, as well as for institutions to ensure the success of online learning. Students' supports are critical to ensure the success. A holistic collaborative support for students is important, and also for the other stakeholders that could help in ensuring the success of online learning, including parents' support as well. So what the new normal will be, besides offering a framework to ensure the quality of higher education, we also need to measure them. These are some of the online education quality indicators that we can actually establish to measure the quality of online education. The indicators indicated here are not exhaustive. That will include educational philosophy, program learning and outcome, learning methods, learning environment, learning assessment, technology infrastructures, as well as support services. So these indicators could help us to ensure and to assure quality curriculum for online learning. Before I end my presentation, I would like to quote, "Disruption creates the new normal, but disruptor creates disruption." Thank you. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson Ong. Now, I would like to welcome Professor Arifin Angriawan for the second presentations.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me? All right. So good morning, Professor Dr. Jamal Wiwoho, distinguished speakers and participants. So my name is Angriawan, and I would like to share with you my experience. Is it clear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we okay? All right. So I was listening to Mr. Johnson's Ong, and then maybe build on top of that. Maybe this could be an example how I do it in strategic management, how I teach in strategic management. So Mr. Johnson talks about assessment, about outcomes, about philosophy, about technology. So hopefully, I will be able to share with you how I teach strategic management. So for this particular slide, several key points. Number one, higher education is all about content, pedagogy, outcomes, and assessment. And my first point, why I put assessment in the middle. So assessment for me as a professor, assessments of content, what I teach, assessment of pedagogy, how I teach, and assessment of outcomes, what I expect from my students. Okay, and I have two slides in teaching strategic management. The next slide, I will concentrate on how technology improve efficiency and effectiveness in education, in online education. And the third slide, I'm going to focus on how technology allows me to achieve the highest level quality of education practice. That is what people do in organization. And how are we going to do it? We construct knowledge. And how do you construct knowledge? We use flipped classroom. Okay, and then the last slide, very basic practices. Most of the time at the beginning of the semester, I will ask my student to do 2-3 very basic, simple things. Okay, so now let's go to second slide. Are we good? So several things that I would like you to focus on. Take a look at 5 corners, the 5 corners. So you see content, outcome and assessment, pedagogy, role, and teaching evaluations and innovation. Okay, so you see all the corners and you see the colors. They have different colors. So by content, what I mean by content, you see on the horizontal, content is about Bloom's cognitive development and disciplinary way of thinking. Because I teach strategic management, I help my students build the Bloom's cognitive skill, and on top of that, strategic thinking. Okay, and vertically, you see, I have knowledge, I have skills, and I have practice. So knowledge is about what you know. Skills is about what you do. Practice is about what people do in real life organizations. So we want to make sure that our student knowledge and skills are the one that people do in the organization, or what people call practice. Okay, so let's take a look at the first row, knowledge. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about learning efficiency and effectiveness because of technology. Okay, so or maybe let me change a little bit. So at the bottom, you see my role. So pretty much what I teach, my style of teaching is flip the classroom. Flip the classroom means that the students read the chapters at home. Students do the homework at home. They come to the class, we do the practice. That is the most difficult part that student learns in the classroom. So we flip the classroom. And before I can flip the classroom, to focus on the most important things in my classroom, that is knowledge construction, that is learning practice. Before I can do that, I use technology to record my lecture. Okay, and there is a specific way how you can do it in order to improve the effectiveness of learning. Okay, so basically, according to the literature, the way that I do it, I explain several slides, and then I ask the students to take quizzes. Okay, so they know, do they understand the first 3 slides? If they understand, and then they can continue. So according to the literature that I put there, there might be a very good way how students learn. Okay. Number 2, technology allows me to do discussion, and we do it online. And a good way to do discussion is Socratic discussion. So when people do discussion, according to Socrates, human beings learn not by being told, but by being guided through questioning. So the discussion, I have 5, 6 discussions all of them about question, a series of questions that lead students to understand. Okay, and then practice bahasa Indonesia praktek. So really what people do in organization. And one of the best way for me to do it in my case is simulation. Okay, so you see, technology solves my problem and allows me to do my job, my role. And my role is to teach practice. Okay, so now let's see the blums. Okay, so the recorded lecture, you see, probably they serve the knowledge and the comprehension. And by discussion, at the best, I believe application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Okay, and sometimes practice involve such thing called judgment. Okay, so when students do their simulation, they face a lot of uncertainty. So for example, in my case, the students are going to learn how to run a simulated firm. So they're constructing factory, they are producing, they produce, they sell, they set the prices, they hire people. Okay, so a lot of uncertainty. They don't know who are they competing with, how much they are going to produce, how much prices that they are going to charge, and so on and so on. So a simulation judgment practice is another kind of very difficult to teach and to learn area. And there is quite a lot of research in that particular area. Okay, maybe next time we will talk about that part. So now, traditionally, pedagogy, traditionally, people do lecture, case discussion, projects. Okay, so you see how lecture, case discussion, projects satisfy the blums and probably experiential learning. There is the part, for example, simulation, internship or externship. There is the one that probably is going to, a student is going to learn differently. Okay, so the skills, the knowledge might be slightly different. Students are going to learn from that experience. And simulation, experiential learning has also other components. Students are not sitting in the classroom. Okay, they use their brain, they think. Okay, in the simulation, they are competing. They are very excited. Okay, so if they win, they are really happy. They are motivated. So it's a different forms of learning taking place. Okay, so now I would like to move to the next slide. And for this particular one, I'm going to focus on flip the classroom. Okay, so we have discussed about the lecture, the discussion, the simulation. Now, how are we going to flip the classroom? I believe the highest level of learning it is supposed to be is practice. After you are done with your class, do you learn what people do in real life in organizations? That is the one. Okay, and what is practice then? What is it composed of? And how do you learn practice? How do you teach practice? Okay, so it turns out to be everything related to a word called structure. Jadi structure in Indonesia, we call it bangunan. Sebuah bangunan. Okay, so take a look at the first white box at the top. I'm good on time. So the first white box, you see structure. So technically, what is knowledge? Knowledge is a structure. What do you know is a structure? How do you know it is a structure? How do you use what do you know? It is a structure. Everything is about structure. Okay, so knowledge, what does it mean by knowledge? The first box, knowledge is concepts and principles. So concepts A, concepts B, okay, A, positive relationship with B. That is what people means by knowledge. Okay, social distancing and coronavirus. Concept, relationship, knowledge. Okay, we know how the virus transmit. Because of that, social distancing and wash our hands. Okay, so that is structure. And it turns out that human beings learn by structuring. It means that if you don't know the basic stuff, you cannot learn more difficult type of stuff. We are structuring. Okay, and it turns out that our knowledge, what do we know, what do we remember, is a structure. Okay, so I goes to my friend's house many times. I never know his home's address, but I can go there because I know you make a right turn at the red light, you see a white big house, and you see a rooftop green color, that is his house. Because that is the way our brains work. Our brains encode, our brains store, our brains retrieve, all of them is by structuring. Okay, so teaching practice. So what do you mean by practice? What people do, there is knowledge. It turns out it is a structure too. So whatever we are going to teach to our students, it should be in the form of structure. I don't teach chapters by chapters. I combine all the chapters together to become a structure. And I use the recorded lecture, and then I use online discussion. Okay, so students learn and construct. Okay, so the key here is, my role here is make sure my structure is a practical structure. Make sure my knowledge structure is what people do in real life organization. And my responsibility in the classroom is to guide my student to construct that knowledge. And how do you do it? I give the structure to my students. Students come to the class. Okay, for example, in one class, we write strategic planning. So there are 29 steps. Okay, the structure. And we go through in the classroom every week, 2, 3 steps, 2, 3 steps, 2, 3 steps, 2, 3 steps. And in the classroom, my job is guiding the students to construct. Okay, applying that knowledge is not easy. Students really need us to be there when they're constructing the knowledge. And that is why people call it flipped classroom. Okay, so in my graduate courses, I don't have tests. My test is the structure. So from the first day of the school, my students know what are the test questions. The test question is that structure that they are going to learn week by week. So you flip the classroom. Okay, they do their homework home. They don't come to class to listen to my lecture. If I can record my lecture, it's going to be much better because I can revise, I can review, I can improve, and my students can do the same stuff. They don't understand, they listen it one more time. So more than substitution, Mr. Johnson Ong mentions about the technology is a substitution. More than a substitution, a recording, Socratic discussion, they are modified, they are augmented, okay, and then in some cases might be redefined. Okay, so this is how we utilize technology. So so far, I described the content part, okay, Bloom's strategic thinking. Okay, so students learn from our classroom, not just the knowledge, skills, and practice, but the way in the field how we think. Strategy thinks differently from accountant, from mechanical engineering. They have their own way of thinking. Okay, so we have to teach both the knowledge part and then the cognitive part. Okay, and then let's do it through our pedagogy, and then let's see the outcome through the assessment, and let's do the teaching evaluations, and let's improve, and then let's create. Okay, and the most important part, the new probably now many people have been doing that. Okay, use the technology as really learning technology. Don't use the technology, the blackboard, the bright space just to post your PowerPoints, to send emails. No, utilize technology as learning technology. Okay, so lastly, let's flip it and let's change our role. Okay, if we don't change our role, we are going to lose our jobs. Okay, if you just recorded your lecture, the knowledge, the chapters, students don't need to come to class. They don't need to attend to my school. They just take it online from Udemy, $10, $19, that's it. What is the value added? My value added is my role, helping the student constructing through the flipped classroom. Use my experience, use my knowledge about so many firms in the world. So in my assignment, I asked the student to select firms that they would like to, they are interested in. Okay, in this country, we do Walmart, we do Ford, okay, we do Facebook, we do Google. Okay, so I have some knowledge about each of the firm, and then I help the students construct their knowledge. And hopefully, by the time that they finish, they are going to be very close to what people do in real life. And indeed, every semester, students will get job, okay, and then they will send me an email. Thank you, professors. I got a job because of your practice. Okay, so the practice makes the students really competitive contender in real job. So one of the students last year, he's a manager at Amazon, and then she wrote me a letter. I became a very competitive contender because I know this firm strategically, operationally, and so on and so on. So let me move to the fourth one, and then I will be brief. I think I have just 3 minutes, right? So some very basic practices. Okay, so when I start my online course or face-to-face, okay, I always tell them these 3 things. So number one, read the syllabus, explore the technology, the Blackboard, the Brightspace, the Google Classroom, okay? Check the competency checklist. That is, what are the outcomes, okay? And then learning process. I would like my student from the beginning to know objectives, what we would like to achieve, activities, what they are going to do in the classroom, the outcomes, okay, and assessment, okay? So let me give you an example. And then the last one, checklist. So when they are done, okay, they need to checklist. This is what I learned. This is the knowledge. This is the skill. This is the practice. They have to check it out. Okay, it is like if you build a car, okay, before your car leaves the factory, you need to make a checklist. Okay, it is running well, the battery is working, and so on and so on. And let me share with you, this is the table that I use in my classroom. Okay, so you see the first column, objectives, module 1, this is what we are going to do. Module 2, this is what we are going to do. Module 3, this is what we are going to do. Activities and assessment, test 1, quiz 1 to 5, assignment, module 2, writing a strategic plan, and so on and so on. And the last column are the outcome, what you are supposed to learn, your knowledge, your skills, and overall the practice. Okay, so I think that is my last. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Angriawan, for the presentations. But before proceeding to the next presentations, I would like to remind all the participants that if you would like to talk to us, you can share your questions in the Zoom chat box that is provided. And one more important announcement for all the participants, that we will share all the materials from today's webinar and also the certificate to your email after the webinar. All right, so next I would like to invite Chris Strods for the next presentations. So Chris, you may start your presentation.
Thank you, Fitri, and good morning to everyone. Well, afternoon in my case. I'm in Melbourne in Australia, where it's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Thank you, very much for tuning in this morning to listen to myself and my colleagues. What I'm going to be sharing with you today is, just bear with me for a second while I share my screen. I'm going to be sharing, has that come up? Yep, great. I'm going to be sharing with you today some research insights from some surveys that we've been conducting over the past few months with prospective international students and some professionals at universities around the world about the impact that COVID-19 or coronavirus has had on the global mobility of international students, as well as what kind of measures institutions have put into place to help sort of combat those effects and maintain teaching in this environment. Just a little bit of an agenda. I'll quickly explain the background and the methodology of the research we've conducted. Then I'll look at the results for the results from the student survey as well as the university survey. You will have already seen a few of these slides because Johnson actually presented them a little bit earlier. It's really pleasing to see that our research is getting out there and being shared throughout the industry. So that was really nice to see, but you will see those again in a moment. Just a little bit of background. Firstly, the student survey. We launched this about mid-February, and we have been sending out periodic invitations to to our list of prospective international student contacts. We've been placing links to the survey on our website. It's still running today, and over that time we've collected 32,000 responses. So it's quite a robust data set. These are prospective international students from all over the world, and it's given us quite a large data set to be able to work with and develop some insights from. And secondly, the institution survey. We've been running this since early March, and we've been sending out invitations to contacts that we have working in higher education institutions around the world. Some people attending today's webinar may have actually completed that survey, but we've got just a tick over 1,000 responses around the world from those surveys. So all of the results that you see today apply to the global sample of data. We haven't sort of tailored it by country or anything like that, but we have done a little bit of investigating into whether there are any inter-country differences. And what we've seen is there's a pretty consistent trend sort of all around the world, and any sort of global insights can be easily applied to specific markets. But firstly, as I said, we will look at student survey responses. Firstly, the overall impact. So we asked, we wanted to get a view of the proportion of prospective international students whose study intentions had been affected by the coronavirus. And the best way to view this is to break it down by week. So from the day that we launched the survey, you can see here from sort of mid-February through to early March, it was a reasonably low level of international students who said that their study plans had been affected. So you'll remember at this point in time, the coronavirus was largely restricted to China and to Wuhan more specifically, as well as it was starting to sort of become more prevalent in countries like Italy, South Korea, Iran. But at this stage, most countries in the world didn't really have large numbers of cases yet. That changed throughout March, and you can see very quickly in the week between the 6th and the 12th of March, that number increased to 34% of international students who said they were affected. And that was the week where the World Health Organization declared it to be a pandemic, and we started seeing larger numbers of infections throughout Europe. And we saw the introduction of the travel ban in the United States, as well as some other countries. And the biggest increase was that following week, so that 13th to the 19th of March. This is when we started seeing cases really start to soar in that Southeast Asia and the Asia Pacific, as well as continuing to increase in Europe. And this is when we started to hear information that young people were not unsusceptible to the coronavirus. So you will note that in the very early stages of COVID-19, when we didn't really know that much about how it worked, there was some talk that it was primarily something that affected older people, and that it wasn't really that much of a risk to younger people. And this is when we started to get data that suggested that was not correct, and younger people were actually at risk as well. And so we saw a really big increase in the proportion of international students whose study plans had been affected over that week. And that increased again towards the end of March. So that increased to 57% by that final week of March. This is when global cases had surpassed 400,000. Places like India, Australia, other countries had gone into lockdown, had implemented wide-scale travel bans. And what we've seen since then is, the following week, so that early March, that had increased to 61%. And at this point, most of the world had been affected, large-scale travel bans, lockdowns, campus closures. And we were seeing, at this point, just under 2/3 of international students had said that their study plans had been affected. And along with that 61%, about 30% said that they weren't sure. So they thought that they might be affected, but they don't know, which leaves just under 10% who actually said that I don't think I've been affected by this. So along with that 60%, there's another 30% who really weren't sure. But what we've seen since then, over the course of April, is a little bit of a stabilization. That proportion who said they've been affected has really stabilized at around that kind of 60 to low 60%, with again about 30% saying that they're unsure. So from April through to now, through to early May, what we've seen is really a stabilization where about just under 2/3 of students have been have had their plans affected, and another third think they might be affected but aren't quite sure. And that seems to be where we've kind of stabilized for now until circumstances around the world start to change. But along with just overall impact, we also wanted to get a feel for how students have been impacted. So what have they actually, how have they changed their plans in response to COVID-19? And I've actually broken this one, I've compressed this one into months. So I've broken this down by months, and the options that we gave them were, had they deferred their entry until the following year, had they chosen to study in a different country, had they abandoned their plans to study internationally altogether, or had they actually done something else. What we've seen is a relatively even split between, in that February, in that initial month, we'd seen that a relatively even split between those looking to defer and those looking to study overseas or in another country. You can see 37% looking to defer, 32% were looking to change the country they were going to study in. And that's understandable because at that stage, there were many countries which had not really responded yet because they didn't have a large number of infections. So it would be reasonable at that time to think maybe I can just go and study in a different country. That obviously changed in March when we started to see that more widespread infection. We started to see countries being locked down, and that proportion who were choosing to change the country they were planning to study in shrunk markedly down to 8%, whilst the proportion who were looking to defer their studies jumped up to 51%. We also saw a really big increase in other. So people who behaved who responded in a different way. And in just a moment, I'll go into what they actually said, the people who had selected something else. But that trend continued into April, where in April, 61% had now said that they were looking to defer their entry to next year. Very few were looking to study in a different country. Very few had abandoned their plans altogether, and about a quarter said that they'd acted in some other way. So at this stage, the most recent data we have seems to suggest, as Johnson mentioned earlier, that deferring study until it's sort of safe to travel, until normal operations resume, appears to be what most students are leaning towards doing. Apologies if you can hear my dog barking in the background. But as I said, there's quite a high proportion who said other. So they were looking to do something other than those three. They tended to fall into three different categories. One was sort of one of general uncertainty. So they don't really know what's happening. There's lots of confusion. They're going to wait and see to get more guidance. And you saw that really spiked in March when we started to see those lockdowns and travel bans implemented, when there was a lot of confusion about who was going to be infected and in what ways and to what extent. So there was a lot of general uncertainty around that period, which sort of shrunk in April when things stabilized and we sort of had more knowledge about what the future was going to look like over the next few months. A lot of people said that it depends on other criteria. So people that were depending on language tests or entry exams, depends what their parents thought, or in some cases it actually depended on currency exchange rate. So will I be able to afford to study in this country depending on the value of my currency at that time? And there was a proportion who were looking to change their plans in another way. So changing to a different university that perhaps had a later deadline so they could wait and see for a little bit longer, potentially looking at studying online instead of face-to-face internationally, or looking to do something else for now, start a career, do some work, and then reconsider studying in the future when sort of the pandemic was more under control. But as you can see, as you saw in that previous slide, it does seem to be that the de facto standard now is that most prospective students appear to be looking to defer until things kind of normalize a little bit. And I think really reassuring that proportion who are planning to abandon their plans altogether remains very low. It's under 10%. Most students still are holding on to their dreams of studying internationally, regardless of what's happening. And I think that's a really optimistic data point there. What's really interesting is how much interest there is in online study. So as you will all know, with face-to-face on-campus study being very difficult in the current climate, many universities are transitioning their courses to online study. As you've seen previously, there's a lot going into that from the perspective of the academic side of preparing high-quality courses that could be delivered online. But we also wanted to get a view for what sort of the appetite is for students who want to study online. And just skip forward a few, so we've got all those data there. What you can see here is there's really two ways to read this data. You can see there's about 18% who said they were extremely or very interested. So about 1 in 5 said that they had a really high level of interest in studying online because of the coronavirus, which seems quite low. But then the other way of reading that data is you can look at the other end and you can see 58% actually have some level of interest. So 58% said they were slightly, somewhat, very, or extremely interested. So there's kind of two ways to read that. There's the optimist view, which is most students are interested in online to some degree. And there's a little bit more pessimistic view where only 1 in 5 have a really high level of interest. The way that I tend to interpret this is whilst online study is perhaps seen as an acceptable stopgap by most students for the time being, it definitely seems like the preference is for that more traditional face-to-face on-campus study. And we know from the International Student Survey that there is a preference for that more traditional style of study amongst international students. The main reason being, even aside from being able to deliver a really good academic online product, there are many other reasons that students look to study online. They want to get the study internationally. They want to get the cultural experience of studying in a different country. They want to learn. They want to go and work in a different country. They want to get that richer experience, which isn't much harder to facilitate in an online environment, even with really high quality academic products. But we probably do expect to see that the level of interest increase over time. If it does become apparent that this is sort of the new normal, I expect that the interest in online study will increase over time, even if the intention is for students to resume that face-to-face traditional sort of study format when the permission, when conditions permit them to do so. I'll just very quickly go through this one. I'm aware of time. We also finally, we asked students how they think that universities should respond. Most obviously, moving the lectures online. 61% said they would expect universities to do that. Just over half said they would expect on-campus dedicated health professionals to provide advice, testing, and so forth. The same would expect those kind of basic safety precautions like antibacterial hand gel to be available on campus at all times. They would expect a helpline. They would expect to have easy on-call access to the latest information about coronavirus and how it affects their studies. And about a third said that they would expect the social distancing measures to be facilitated in university through spreading out lectures into larger rooms, minimizing that face-to-face contact. I suspect that's quite low because a lot of people would expect that that lecture format to be conducted online rather than face-to-face for the time being. But there are a lot of expectations that students will have when those face-to-face studies do resume. Moving on to the university response. To start off with, and you have seen this slide before when my colleague Johnson shared it. Firstly, we asked, what are universities doing to combat coronavirus? And as you've seen, the most common measure is to switch courses online. 54% said they've done that. I expect that number is probably higher now than it was obviously this survey has been in the field since March, and we would have expected the proportion who completed it in, say, April or May to be a higher proportion. Would have expected we would expect them to have moved their studies online. But I think the point to take here is that is kind of the de facto standard response compared to delaying start dates, changing application deadlines, or deferring offers. It does seem like switching courses online is kind of the main strategy that universities have adopted to maintain sort of normal teaching operations during this time. From a marketing and recruitment perspective, and you've seen the slide as well, what we have seen, expectedly so, is that digital recruitment activities have become a lot more important. So you can see 76% and 73% said digital events and digital marketing are going to be more important for maintaining that international student pipeline over the coming months. Similarly, 71% expect their one-to-one student meetings to be online. And then lead generation as well is going to be more important. I think we're going to, as you'll see in a moment, we're probably going to expect to see a reduction in international applications over the short term. So that ability to generate that volume of leads is going to be much more important. Conversely, understandably, those one-to-one in-person meetings and in-person things like careers, fairs, and events are going to be less important because in many cases, they're not going to be possible for the time being. So we would, and we have actually seen instances of universities actually pivoting their face-to-face recruitment events to online ones. QS actually has a division which runs online runs recruitment events for universities, and they've actually had some experience over the past couple of months pivoting those face-to-face events, which are not currently possible, to those digital, to that digital space where it is still possible to reach students and maintain that recruitment pipeline for the coming months. Frequency of contact. We asked how often universities are getting in contact with their current students with news and updates regarding COVID-19, and we saw that most are getting in touch at least weekly, so 26% daily or more, and 44% a few times a week, 18% once per week. So around about 90% said that they're in touch at least weekly, but that sweet spot seems to be sort of a few times a week. So universities are maintaining frequent contact to make sure that their students are kept well abreast of the latest information, making sure that they're up to speed with what's going on and how it affects their studies. Contact channels. So in what ways are they contacting their students? As you can see here, email is by far the most common, where about 9 out of every 10 universities said they're using email, but we also saw a very high percentage contacting students through social media. So primarily through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. They were the main platforms that universities specified that they're using to communicate the latest news about how coronavirus has affected their campus operations. And about a quarter said something else. So other measures include messages through their student portal, the university website, video calls like the one that we're on at the moment, as well as face-to-face meetings where permitted. So there's a whole range of contact channels that universities are using to keep their students informed. And what we always like to say is the more the better. Students like to engage, access information in different ways. And it's really important that you provide as many ways of accessing this information as possible to increase the likelihood, because not everybody reads emails they get from their university, but they might read a social media message from their university, or they might respond to a Skype call from their university. So making sure that as many channels are available as possible will be really important. And finally, the last thing that I'm going to share with you today is most universities are expecting that at least in the short term, there's going to be a decrease in international applications. So you can see 51% said a decrease, 21% said they don't know, and 23% said no change. So a slight majority said that they expect, at least in the short term, the number of applications are going to go down. And what that means is there's going to be more competition. Fewer applicants mean there's going to be more competition between universities to court those applicants. And I think what we need to be really mindful there is being really efficient with those processing those applications, being able to quickly make and convert those offers, as well as really making sure that your university is positioned well compared to your local, your other competing universities, not just within your own country, but around the world. Making sure your university knows what students want and can communicate that they can provide that product, because at least in the short term, there is going to be a lot more competition for those international students. That's it for today. The last thing that I'll do, I won't go through this because I'm a little bit over time, but this final point down the bottom, we have a lot of this information about the university response to COVID-19, white papers, reports, webinars and the like, and you can access that at this link below, qs.com/coronavirus. You can see some more extensive reporting on what we've discussed today, as well as all of the other content we've produced in this field. But yeah, qs.com/coronavirus is where to go if you want to see more about this. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris, for the presentations. So before proceeding to the last presentations, I would like to inform you to fill in the attendance list that we have shared in Zoom chat box. So please fill the attendance list. Next presentations, I would like to invite Professor Sajidan for the last presentations. Floor is yours.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope we are all doing well, although we are in the middle of this pandemic and also fasting periods. I am Sajidan, the Vice Rector in Universitas Sebelas Maret in Surakarta. I think you can see my short curriculum vitae in this slide. Yeah. Thank you for giving us opportunity to talk about my paper about how did UNS respond to the COVID-19 outbreaks. So we are known that up to 4 million people around in the world have been infected with COVID-19, and around 6% have died. And especially in Indonesia, there are 14,265 positive cases and 990 died per yesterday. Yeah, this is the condition. So COVID-19 and UNS response, the first phase on March 13, Surakarta city was announced as emergency due to a death caused by COVID-19. Yeah, therefore, we are really take this seriously. We need to do extra precaution to flatten the curve of COVID-19 spreading in Indonesia. And some precaution we have done, such as the first one is on March 13, UNS decided to move the teaching and learning process to online system. And also on March 16, UNS decided to work from home policy for academic and support staff until end March. The second phase, the COVID-19 and UNS response, is the online teaching and learning and work from home policy was extended to end of April, and also courses, yes, exam and thesis and dissertation defense can be doing and be done online. This, I think, this combination between synchronous and asynchronous learning. So, and student community service are offered for thematic program on COVID-19. So this is on April 30, because the student have to stay at home and conduct field work courses to have the community to handle COVID-19. So. And this one is the phase from UNS response, the COVID-19 outbreaks. Yeah. The online teaching and learning and work from home policy was extended to end of May. And then this is the first one in UNS, I think also in Indonesia, this online graduation ceremony is on May 2nd, 2020. Yeah. And also, inshallah, inauguration ceremony, school professorship will be done in the 3rd May. So the next one is documentation of online graduation ceremony in UNS. So, yeah. The online graduation ceremony was well conducted and attended by 259 graduates. Yeah. And has been watched by more than 1.5 million netizens. This is very unique. I think so. There's first one in UNS and also I think first one in Indonesia. This is about the helping student. Yeah. UNS providing subsidiary of phone built for students to support online teaching and learning process, and also UNS collecting donation from academic and support staff, yeah, and allocated them for those who deserve help, especially students who are still living surrounding the campus. So this was about budgeting and other policies, offering call for proposal for applied research on COVID-19. Yeah. The second one is in order to optimize the achievement of the UNS key performance indicators, KPI, in COVID-19 outbreak, we have refocusing on our business plan through 2G. Yeah, we call 2G or GG policy. This is moving and replacing. Yeah. Budget revision, which is 2G policy, moving and replacing. This is refocusing on activities in handling COVID-19. And also the online routine meeting for all units within the university. We use Google Meet, Zoom, Webex, and WhatsApp, and also email, I think so. Yeah, we have different platforms. So. Another policies is partnership activities, including signing memorandum of understanding, either with domestic or international partner, are mostly done through also online system. And international and national guest lecture, like today, can be done through online system. So this question, how UNS contribute in handling COVID-19 pandemic? Yeah. We have a university hospital, this UNS hospital. UNS hospital won the trust of the Ministry of Education and Culture and also Ministry of Health as main hospital and laboratory for COVID-19 in Central Java province. This is the activities for our medical staff, yeah, doctor, nurse. And also, this is very interesting. Yeah, this is UNS Hospital as Research Center for COVID-19. We also appointed as a Research Center for COVID-19. We have granted fund from Ministry of Research and Technology, Republic of Indonesia. We specialize in researching herbal medicine against COVID-19. I think also through docking molecular. We develop also big data or big data, the genomic virus COVID-19 specific Indonesia. So this one, the university innovation to support the needs of hospital in handling COVID-19. Here, some activities from our researcher, also our student. For example, here is our student producing face shield for frontliners in hospital, like a doctor, a nurse, and a medical staff. And also, this one is picture from our researcher in UNS developing ventilator. So the next one is, the next slide will be presented by Mr. Irwan Trinugroho. Mr. Irwan, please, your times. Are you ready, Pak Irwan?
Yes.
Okay. Pak Irwan, the head of International Office of UNS. Yeah.
So my job is to continue the presentation, a few more slides from the Professor Sajidan. So mostly focused on the policies of the university to related to the international activities to handling the COVID-19. So first, of course, our concern is on the international student. So we release a safety protocol for the international student. Basically, the university recommend the international student to stay in the city. But if they decide to leave Indonesia for very reasonable reason, the students still have to follow the online teaching and learning process and have to regularly report to the international office. And the second one is that we closely monitor the situation of the international students, especially those stay in the surrounding the campus, and we also provide the substantial assistance from the international student. And we monitor closely by using the the group of WhatsApp and so on and so forth. So every day I get a report from the student. And then also, of course, we ask the all units and also faculty and school to not to invite the foreign guests to the campus until the situation improve. Prof, sorry, Prof Sajidan, can you move the slide?
And yes.
Okay. And then also related to the admission of the international students, we decided to continue the process of the selection using the online system. And surprisingly, the number of the applicants of the international prospective student is increasing significantly, more than 60% compared to the last year. So this is very surprising, contrary to the research of the CRIS that mentioning that the number of prospective international students may decrease until 50%. But for the case of UNS, we receive 60% more application compared to the last year. And every year UNS sends students from the international mobility to the overseas universities or to multinational companies and so on and so forth. We decided to continue the selection process, but we postponed the departure until the situation become improved. So we have the candidate of the international mobility, but we postponed the departure of the student. And then the last one is that UNS recommend to the all of the international conferences, and then also for the international guest lecture to be conducted in online system. So no need to invite people from the overseas to come face to face in Indonesia. And then move to the last one. And this is some challenges. And I think as most of the universities, they have some challenges, as mentioned by Johnson. First is that there is a disparity in the digital literacy and skill among the faculty members of the university. So improving the literacy, especially in the digital space, and also from the capability in handling student via online is important from the university. And then also we need to to bolster the creativity of the faculty members, especially to encourage students to actively participate in the online courses, because it is not easy, especially from those from the older faculty members. It's not easy to handling the student. And then the second one is that we are still working to improve the quality of facilities to support the online teaching and learning process. And then the last one is, yes, this is also mentioned by Johnson, the quality assurance, and also Professor Angriawan, and about the quality assurance of the online and teaching learning process. We are still establishing a more systematic quality assurance on the online teaching and learning. And I think this is all of the presentation. So thank you very much.
Danke schön.
Thank you, Professor Sajidan and also Mr. Irwan for the presentations. Thank you for all the speakers that have presented today. And now let's move to the Q&A sessions. And we already have a few questions from the large crowd here. The first question is coming from Helen Christine for Mr. Johnson. So let me read the questions first. In the worst case scenario, this kind of epidemic might appear again in the future. So what are the things that universities need to prepare to reach the standard of educating students? Will there be a shift in how universities should be held? So please, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you for the question. I think from the progress and development of how pandemic is being handled by most countries, we likely see that this will be last longer than expected. I think students may not be so quick to go back to the normal of a face-to-face classroom. Before the pandemic, we do not see a high degree of online education being offered to students. That's why when the QS make its survey, there was a switch of 50%. They are being forced to do that. So in other words, from this strategy, we can see that most universities probably are not ready in offering quality assured online education. And I think the planning is important for university to take a long-term view about online education. I think some of the students who have started learning from home may love online learning because it basically saves a lot of their time in traveling. And also if it's asynchronous, then they can actually learn at any time, any place, any devices, especially for the millennium. The reasons for a high increase in synchronous application, because that will be the fastest and easiest way for faculty members to switch from a face-to-face to an online facilitation. And that's the reason why we see a big jump in Zoom, in Google Classroom. But we don't see a big jump in asynchronous, because asynchronous learning takes a long time for faculty members to design, to learn, and also to put the lesson online. That will require a highest level of skill to design a good online learning. So I think the framework that are presented give you some ideas of what are the areas that university need to consider if they really want to assure a high quality online education in the future. So these are things that university could start to think about and probably to also plan how these elements and factors could be implemented to give high quality education so that it will not be compromised. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, and I hope it answers your questions, Helen Christine from UNS. For the second questions, we have from Joseph from UNS to Chris. According to QS, which countries are likely to have the highest numbers of incoming international students in the coming years?
Thanks, Joseph, and that's a really good question. Whilst we don't have any data specifically on where we expect that growth to be, what we do know and what we can infer from the data that we do have is that prospective students are very much paying attention to how individual countries are responding to COVID-19, both from a public health perspective and how they are managing international education. So they will be looking at government responses. They'll be looking at what kind of measures they've put in place to ensure the safety and also the financial security of the international students that are currently there. And they will be forming opinions about the reputation of those countries in the coming months. So what I think we'll see is that the countries which are seen to have managed this really well, the countries which have put in appropriate measures to protect the safety of the community and international students, the countries which have put in measures to care for and support international students to make sure that they're not doing any undue suffering as a result of the circumstances, and the countries which are ready to get back to offering the types of educational experiences they want are the countries which are going to be at an advantage when we do start to see the large flows of international students resume.
All right. Thank you, Chris, for the answers, and I hope it answers your question, Joseph. And now for the third questions coming from Dito Anurogo, a medical lecturer from Universitas Muhammadiyah Makassar, and the question is addressed to Professor Arifin Angriawan. So what are the important and impactful soft skills and hard skills that students have in this millennial or digital era? Any thought about this, Professor?
Okay, so first of all, I think this is what I believe, okay. So maybe number one, technical skills. So if you are a doctor, then you need to know your area. If you are like me, a strategic management professor, technical, techniques, knowledge, practice, I need to know. And then number two, what people call the cognitive skill. Okay, cognitive is cognition, is about how we know, how we learned. And very important part, I believe nowadays, is about critical thinking and creativity. So many years ago, all the wealth come from management. Okay, but in the last 10 years, all the wealth, all the money, all the new businesses, the startup, all of them come from creativity, come from their entrepreneurial creativity. So I think creativity is really, really important skills, cognitive skills. And another set of skill probably are very, very important. Overall, people call it emotional intelligence. So some of them, you need to know yourself, okay, your strengths, your weakness. And then for me, self-awareness, for me, it means a lot to be work hard and grit, G-R-I-T, grit. Grit in the sense that you need to believe what you want to achieve, your goals, okay, and put effort and stay with the same goal. That's what people mean by grit, perseverance, okay. So I think these are some of the very basic things that students need to learn. And another set are related to how social skills, how we relate to others. And two very important one is teamwork and network. Okay, the teamwork and network. And by the way, there are a lot of really good models about skills. And one of the one that I like, I think the name is called 21st Century Skills. So if you Google it, you are going to get it. Okay. And did I answer the question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Professor Arifin. I hope it answers your questions. Dito from Muhammadiyah Makassar.
Thank you, Padito.
Next questions is addressed to Professor Sajidan and also probably Pak Irwan, if you want to add some things. From Prahyani Ariati Putri from Bogor. She thought about online exams, which can have a higher risk of plagiarism because students can have full access to the whole course materials and resources. So what is the best design for online assessment should take by the teachers to reduce inequalities and the risk of plagiarism? So professors, any thought about this?
I think, Ivan, can you answer so?
Yes. Basically, for avoiding the plagiarism during the exam of the, maybe Prof. Arifin and also Johnson will add something. But in my experience, for reducing the probability of doing cheating during the exams, so what I can do is that because my courses is more on the higher order thinking skill, so this is not not a closed book exam that finally I do, but we move to the closed book online exam. So the student, they have they have access to all the materials of the courses, but the exams become shorter than the normal exam. So this is what I did for my courses. So no worries with the cheating or the plagiarism and so on and so forth. So and they don't have time to ask the friends and so on and so forth. So it doesn't matter for myself. But maybe Pak Arifin have the experience of how to handle the cheating during the exam, or maybe Mr. Johnson can add something about the issues of the cheating and plagiarism during the online exams.
Yes, I think academic integrity has always been a challenge, whether it's online or even offline education. But I think for online, particularly, I think it's become more crucial because student is not directly in front of the teacher, and therefore the student could actually seek a lot of assistance and help, or even they can collaborate, to cheat the exam. There are numbers of ways that how this can be overcome. I think one important thing is that we need to shift the learning outcome to a higher level. The question and assignment and exercises should be shifted to a higher level, because higher level of learning outcome like creation, evaluation, analysis, and application are more difficult to copy because it requires the application of the knowledge. While testing and recording of knowledge are much easier to copy because they give similar or same responses. So I think in the planning for academic integrity, is good for the faculty member to shift the assignment and question to high order thinking. And also in terms of the spread, it's important not to focus only the final examination, but spread the weightage and the risk of the exam into different components. For example, into a pre-lesson, into during the lesson, and also after the lesson. There are numbers of software that can be installed on the student computers that can actually help through proctoring the assessment process. So university can actually request students to install some of these active and passive software, all right, that could actually monitor what the students are basically doing. So these are some of the measures that could be possible to ensure academic integrity, and also the policies on plagiarism need to be highlighted before any assessment have taken place. Thank you.
Okay, so this is what I think. So, so for my MBA students, I don't have exams. So I said earlier, I flipped the classroom so the students know the exam from the first day. So I gave them 72 questions. And at the end of the semester, you answer all the 72 questions. So they are learning from the first day. And according to research, it is much more effective. Student learns more. Okay, so that is what I do. And according to research too, I give students revision opportunity. So they give it to me every week, maybe 10 worksheets, maybe 5, maybe 7. Okay, and I do my grading, and then I ask them to revise. Okay, this is what is wrong, this is what is right, and then redo it and send it back to me. So for me, my role as a professor is that part. This is your mistake, and then this is what I contribute to you. That is my job. My job is not testing my students. My job is, do my students learn and how I can contribute? That's my job. Okay, and actually, research shows that students learn more from their revision. They remember for a long time. So if you make a mistake and then you change, there is where learning takes place. There is the things that you will remember for a long time to come. So I don't have tests for my MBA students. I've been teaching for how many years now? 13 years now. So from my first day teaching for my MBA students, I don't have tests. That's it. I flip the classroom. And for my undergrad, sometimes I have tests, sometimes I don't have. So very similar, do the homework. So analyze the firm strategically, choose any firm that you want, and then these are the questions. So testing, according to research, testing is not really an effective way of learning. So if I test my student, come to the class, and then perform this skill, write your answers, okay? And then differently. I give you the questions, you do it from home. Most of the students, they are going to try until they can do it. Does it make sense what I'm saying? We need to give the students opportunity. It is not about testing. It is about, do you learn or not? So they prepare for the test and then they get a C, they get a B, and then that's all? Is that what you want? So I prefer everybody get an A in my class and learn. And I learned that if you give the student 2 questions, the same question, one in the test and one take it home, okay, trust me, student learns much better. They have the time, they don't have the place constraint. Okay, give them time, they work, they learn better. So I don't really believe the idea of testing. So I don't have tests. And I have quizzes. And then I still have some multiple choice that students might cheat. Okay, but I'm switching. And I have quizzes, and the way that I approach my quizzes is different. Student takes the quiz, and then they get the score 7, 8 out of 10, and then they can review their results, and then they try one more time, and then I let them know the answers. So the point here is learning. The point here is not, you don't want your students to have an A, B, or C. What I care more is my students should learn. They have to earn what they deserve. So the students who are struggling, and the students, the smart student, if you test them together, we don't provide chance for, some of the students are smarter than others. They are learning faster. So it's not fair the way that we test the students. I don't know, does it make sense what I tried to say? So my point here is that let's flip the classroom. There is no such thing called homework. There is no such thing called testing. What is important is learning. Forget about everything.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Angriawan. It's a very interesting answers about let's just flip the class, just make it a new normal, right? And I hope it answers your question, Prahayani. And next questions coming from Dinar from Maranatha Christian University, and is addressed to Chris. So how to raise or to keep the quality standard of learning due to maybe the lecturers have the different ways to teach and the different tools to do the online class. And thought about this, Chris?
Yeah, it's a really important question, Dinar, and unfortunately, I don't know whether I have a really good answer for you. I'm not an expert in sort of in the delivery of teaching, and I think perhaps Arifin or Johnson, who did examine that idea of online study in their presentations, might be a better person to answer this question, because it's not. Whilst I acknowledge it's a very important question, it's probably not something that I'm confident enough in that I have the answers to answer that for you.
All right. So probably Mr. Johnson or Professor Arifin, can you share your thought about this?
I think not just the summative assessment that is important, but also in terms of formative assessment. If we are using a synchronous platform, there is a lot of opportunity for the faculty members to develop formative assessment, because asynchronous network allow us to create student interactivities. And in these interactivities, we are able to create many formative assessment and feedback. And I think that will help the student learn more through online learning. I think it's also important because online learning have rather low completion rates. It could be as low as 20–30%, and in some cases, students take a much longer time to complete their study because there's a lack of engagement, there's a lack of motivation. So in the design of online learning, there's a need to consider how we can actually engage students and how can we motivate students. So formative assessment through interactivities could actually help to motivate students to learn. So they need some feedback, they need some guidance to help in the learning process. So do not rely too much on summative assessment, because that probably could be carried out sometime after learning. But also progressively test the student along the way to provide feedbacks and guidance to improve their learning. So that could be a better way in using a synchronous platform. At the same time, students could also repeat what they have learned, because a synchronous platform allows students to go back again. Unlike synchronous platform that basically is the live facilitation that may be a bit difficult. Yeah. Thank you.
Savitri, would you mind repeat your question one more time? I couldn't hear clearly.
Sorry. All right. So it's from Dina. How to raise or to keep the quality standard of learning due to maybe the lecturers have the different ways to teach and the different tools to do the online class. How to raise or to keep the quality standard of learning.
Okay, so maybe from my presentation today, from my point of view, so I think I described earlier the quizzes, the online discussion, and then flip the classroom. Okay, so I think probably that is, we can achieve both online or offline, the highest quality. But the problem now is about motivation. Okay, so this is a little bit trouble. Maybe the best students, wherever they are in the classroom, at home, they are motivated to learn. So we don't have problem with that group of students. So, but the problem is some students, they register, they take online classes because they think it is easier. Okay, so the problem here is motivation. Okay, so several things that I do, I mentioned earlier what I do on the first day of the class. So I give them, number one, please take a look at the syllabus, take a look at that table, what we are going to do in the class, and then take a look, what are the outcome of the class. So we are on the same page. So they know what they are going to do. I know what we are going to do. So we are already engaging from the very beginning, engaging in terms of what to learn, how to learn, engaging in terms of schedule and everything, engaging. And then feedback. Feedback is very, very important. So I went to an annual review a couple of months ago. And then my department chair told me that the student answer for your online class, the class was very engaging. Okay, so that is what I did. And then another part that I do, every week, I send announcement. So for example, we have online discussion. So I read all their online discussion and then I summarize it and then I post it so the students get the feedback. And then we have simulation. So 5 teams were competing. 5 teams are competing every semester. And we compete by week. So every week, I see their decisions, their results, and then again, I make my feedback. Okay, this might be the reason, this might be the reason, this is the point that you are missing, you need to improve this, you need to improve that. So communication. But if you approach an online class, especially the asynchronous, okay, you might lose everybody in the class. And I personally believe that people that take online classes, they have reasons. And some of the reasons are because of time constraint. I like to work from home because of why? Because I save 2 hours of my time. And 2 hours means that I have 1.5 days more every week. 5 days is 10 hours. So because of working from home, instead of driving, okay, I work more. So I like that part. And some students, they experience the same logic. Why do I need to drive 1 hour? Difficult to find a parking lot. And then you need to walk to the classroom, and then you need to be there 5 minutes before. So we are wasting our students' time, commuting time, maybe 1 hour, maybe 2 hours. If you can take it from home, why don't you take it from home? So I have my own thinking. I don't require my students to do synchronous. Okay, because what I do, they can do it by themselves anytime, anywhere they want. Why should I ask them, let's meet online every week at certain time? Does it make sense what I try to say? You can read your syllabus by yourself. You can take the quiz anytime you want. You can do your homework anytime you want. And then if you have questions, you can send me an email. You can Zoom me. Why we need to be there at the same time? Why we are causing a lot of problems to everybody? So that is what I believe. That is what I believe. That is maybe the reason why students teach online. Maybe Chris have an answer for that. Is that true? Pure online, what students expect? Do students really like synchronous? I don't know. If they do the synchronous, I know they can save driving time, but the time frame that might be not exactly what they need. Okay, so don't violate such a simple a logic. You might lose your students. They are motivated, but they just cannot do it because you require them to be there at 3 o'clock every Wednesday, every Thursday, but they need to be somewhere at work. And then we talk about the engagement, we talk about the feedback, and then we talk about the first day. Okay, and I personally believe that if we do a good job, if we do useful things, we trust our students, they are going to give you 10 times better. If I spend my time for my class, my students know that, my student is going to respect that, my student is going to pay back. If we are lazy, students are going to be lazier. If you work hard, students are going to work harder. So we need to be online or offline to create that engagement, motivation, start from us, and then put a high expectations. And then always think from students' point of view. Don't just simply assume that student this, student that, student blah, blah, blah. No, it could be us. I don't want to go to meetings because I'm wasting my time. Similarly, students think if the class is not helpful for me, I get nothing from the class. Why should I drive and park my car and stay 2 hours in the classroom, but 3 hours in the classroom? They have reason to choose online. So I think we should be on the same page, think clearly, and then don't assume this, don't assume that, and then we are going to end up with a really beautiful relationship between professor and students, and because of that, learning is going to take place. I always believe students are really, really nice. I remember my very, very beginning years, which I was learning to teach because I trust my students, I respect my students, I work my students, the student teach me what should I improve, this and that, and I got very high score in my teaching evaluation. Does it make sense what I try to say? Students are really wonderful people. But if you make mistake, say you make a mistake. If you don't know how to do that, let them know. They will teach they'll teach you, and then they respect you, and then they will give you a really high teaching evaluation. So everything is nice. Don't worry, just do your job, spend your time, work what you have to do, and then everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually teaching is also a learning process. And thank you, Professor Arifin, for sharing your experience. And next questions is addressed to Chris from Maria, Universitas Nusa Cendana. So as most Australian universities depend on the large number of overseas students, particularly from the Asian countries, what steps do you think the Australian government or Australian tertiary educations in particular will respond to this? Please.
that's a really good question, Maria. There's a few things there to unpack. Firstly, you are right that many Australian universities are heavily dependent on international students, and as you said, particularly from Asia. The immediate response in that, from that perspective, is that many Australian universities have projected substantial reductions in revenue over kind of the next few years. And there's kind of the word that's going around at the moment within the industry is austerity budgets. So a lot of Australian universities are expecting that they will suffer quite a lot over at least the next kind of 2 or 3 years. And I think that that's just, at this point, it's just accepted that there is going to be some pain in terms of, from that side of things. In terms of the response, there's kind of 3 levels of response. There's the federal government, there's the individual state governments, and there's the universities themselves. In terms of the federal government, we haven't really seen much in terms of support. So the federal government hasn't really laid out any specific funding to provide support for international students. International students are able to access the things that every other Australian can access in terms of things like healthcare, charity, food banks, all of that type of stuff that's designed to help all Australians. International students are able to access those. But at this point, the Australian government hasn't made any specific funding available for international student support services. The state governments individually have. They've done a little bit more in terms of providing specific hardship grants, services, cash payments in order to help international students who are in the country manage that. And individual universities have done the same. So individual universities each have their own responses, but many of them have implemented things like hardship funds, fee waivers, health and physical and mental health care support. So the universities have got quite a robust program in place to provide support and care for international student wellbeing. That's from the perspective of current students. From the perspective of from the recruitment pipeline, it's a little bit more difficult because we don't really know what's going to be happening in the next few months. We don't know when international travel is going to be permitted. We don't know when campuses are going to be reopening. But there is kind of an expectation that when international travel does commence, international students will be among the first people who are allowed to travel to Australia. So there's been some conversation over the past few days of looking to hopefully lift an international travel ban in July, which would allow international students to come to Australia to commence semester 2. That's in its very early stages. There's nothing been really kind of confirmed yet, but there is, if you look at the Australian newspapers, there are talks about ideally best case scenario is there will be some measures in place to allow international students to arrive in Australia to commence semester 2. And in terms of, from a university perspective, in terms of that future student pipeline, they're just doing the best they can with what they have. So as I mentioned in my presentation earlier, that pivot to digital recruitment, trying to replace those face-to-face recruitment pipeline channels with digital equivalents, promoting online study alternatives where possible, even if that's not kind of a fully online degree. That might be you can study online remotely until you're able to travel to Australia, and then you can do that. There's lots of different measures that different universities are employing, but it's all kind of centered around hopefully lifting those international travel barriers to international students as quickly as possible, and ideally returning to normal service as quickly as possible. But I suppose overall, what I would say about the strategy is it's quite disparate at the moment. Different universities, different state governments all have different strategies for managing COVID-19. And some of them are quite robust and comprehensive and really good. But at the moment, it is quite a serious problem for international education in Australia. And a lot more will be done over the coming months to kind of assist international students, both current ones who currently study in Australia, as well as maintaining kind of the flow of future international students in the coming years.
All right. Thank you, Chris, for the answers. And Maria, I hope it answers your questions. Next questions is addressed to Mr. Irwan and also Professor Sajidan. It's from Irfan Shah from Institute Teknologi 10 November. The question is, Mr. Irwan mentioned that there is a 60% increase of international admissions in UNS. Do you mind sharing any strategies or comments regarding increasing international students intake during these global situations?
Yes,
Please.
so thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we did some analysis why the number of the admission this year is increasing significantly. So, but first is, UNS has a scholarship for the international student, which is the waiving of the tuition and fees. Previously, it was only for the undergraduate student, but now we extend to master and PhD student. So the increasing number, there is a substantial number of increasing admission from the master and PhD applicants. And then the second one is that last year we established some collaboration with universities from the developing countries. Let's say, for example, the Madagascar and so on and so forth. So we receive substantial increasing number of the applicant from those countries. So I think these two are the reasons why the number of the applicants from the international prospective student are increasing significantly this year. Thank you.
Okay, I will add the answer for Pak Irwan, yeah. Okay, the increasing the international student in UNS, I think that's the impact from UNS culture. We call the UNS active. This achievement orientation, customer satisfaction, teamwork, integrity, visionary, and entrepreneurship. This is impact from our culture, and then the graduate from overseas student then can increase from the new student. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sajidan and also Mr. Irwan for the answers. And I hope it helps you to figure out why this is happening in UNS. And probably it will be the last questions because we have to end the webinar at 11:30. I know that there is still a lot of unanswered questions here. But yeah, probably we will have next time to answer your questions. So next questions is addressed to Mr. Johnson Ong from UNITA, from Universitas Selamat Riyadi Surakarta. So through e-learning post-pandemic COVID-19 right now, is it really able to ensure the ability of each student can be honed? Any thought about this?
Ensure the ability of a student can be what?
Can be honed.
Ah.
Can.
All right.
Uh-huh.
I think the planning of the curriculum is always important. All right, in trying to achieve the learning outcome. So it had to be carefully designed, whether it's offline or even online education, that the teaching and learning and also in terms of the student assessment are constructively aligned to the achievement of a learning outcome. So a variety of different activities, especially in terms of student learning activities, need to be designed in a way that could actually support the achievement of the learning outcome. The more challenging part is the social emotional learning, because that is something that is not easy to achieve over a lesson, for example. So social emotional skill probably would take a much longer time for the student to actually learn on those soft skills. So I think the planning for such skill need probably take a longer period of time and need to be collaborated, even calibrated with other courses to ensure the delivery and achievement of those social emotional learning skill. Exponential learning is an important component in order to help students to learn social emotional skill. But it's a big challenge to do this online for exponential learning because they don't have the feel to understand certain emotional uh, influence on their decision or even on their action. So an aspect of offline assignment could help to complement what probably could be missing out in the online learning. So I think the faculty member need to craft the design of certain offline assignment that probably relate to community. For example, in this pandemic, what could the student do to support the pandemic? For example, they can actually design certain posters about hand washing or even social distancing, or they can volunteer themselves in the community, you know, to help in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. So such assignment and exercises could actually help to build the social emotional component that probably could be missing in an online learning environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnsons. But I think we still have around 8 minutes before 11:30. So I would like to go to Professor Arifin. So it's a questions from Ratna Kartika from UIN Antasari Banjarmasin. So she's asking about Bloom's cognitive development and also strategic thinking in your presentations. You explain about cognitive thinking begin from knowledge until judgment. So how about new cognitive thinking of taxonomy Bloom begin from remembering until create? Is it different?
So let me clarify. So in my previous slide, Bloom's and strategic thinking. So Bloom's combined with strategic thinking. So the Bloom's stop at evaluation. So judgment is not part of Bloom's. So according to Bloom's taxonomy, the first one, you remember, you recognize. Sometimes people call it knowledge. And then if you know, doesn't necessarily means that you understand what people call comprehension. So when I was teaching 13 years ago in strategic management, there is a strategy called cost leadership strategy. Okay, and then students in the test, they know what is cost leadership strategy is. They get the answer correct. But when they run the simulation, they keep saying, this is a cost leadership strategy, but indeed it is not. It is another type of strategy. So sometimes students, they know, but they don't understand. And because of that, comprehension. So satunya is tahu, the other is paham. Okay, and application in the simplest meaning means that can you apply what you know? Can you do it? Okay, so I tell you, swimming, you need to move your hand, you need to move your feet. Okay, but can you do it? Are you going to jump into the pool just because you know? But you need to apply it. Okay, it's the simplest meaning. Analysis basically means that you need to understand the elements. So for example, in strategic management, we learned that industry profitability. So how much money an industry? It turns out that by nature, some industries are more profitable than others by nature. Okay, some industries like airline industry, before and after Okay, I know the profit is going to be close to zero because it has been like that for 40 years. So what are the reasons? What are the reasons? We need to analyze it. What are the reasons? What people call industry structure. So you analyze it to the components. Okay, industry profitability is poor because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reasons. That is analysis. And synthesize is different, the other way around. You know a lot of small pieces, but what do they mean together? That is what you call synthesizing. Okay, so now the last one, evaluation basically means that, so you know a lot of stuff, you understand, you analyze, you synthesize, but is it good? Is it bad? Why? What are the implications? Do I have any other options? That is what people means by evaluation. And unfortunately, in nowadays environment, okay, there are a lot of uncertainty. So how are you going to evaluate? How are you going to analyze? How are you going to synthesize? And this is a really unique form of learning judgment. Okay, so I don't know myself much about that. Okay, but in business, a lot of people make decisions by judgment. Okay, how they deal with uncertainty. So I want to clarify a judgment, is that part of the strategic thinking part and not part of the Bloom's cognitive development? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Arifin. I hope it answers your questions, Yunita. So great. Thank you for all the distinguished speakers for sharing your insight and thoughtfulness today. And we really apologize for the unanswered questions because we still have a lot of questions here, but unfortunately the time is up. We have to end this webinar. So before that, I would like to make some important announcement for all the participants. So we will send all the materials and also the certificate to your email based on your attendance list. And also, don't forget to check out today's webinar recording in UNS official YouTube account. So we hope you get some valuable knowledge, and we do hope that you always stay healthy. Thank you for participating in today's webinar. We hope to see you again next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Chris.
Thank you so much.
Makasih Pak Arifin.
Thank you, everyone.
Sama-sama Pak, sama-sama Pak Sajidan.
Backgroundnya itu background mana ini?
Itu dari Bandung.
Alhamdulillah.
Salah satu pelukis yang paling saya suka. Hi Chris.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
See you next time.
Bye.
Talk to you.
See you next time. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Johnson.
Bye.
Pak.
everyone.
Everyone, sama-sama.
Okay. Okay.
Aku lihat ya.
Okay. Pak Irwan, mungkin ada conclusion apa? Terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Ari. Ya, ini jam berapa di US? Sudah jam 11:30 12 malam ya?
Ya.
Besok ada kelas?
Besok nggak ada kelas, tapi ada acara dengan ISMS.
Okay.
Jadi saya bawa masalah ini juga.
Okay.
Tapi itu malamnya.
Terima kasih ya Pak Ari ya mengganggu.
Nah, ini kalau ke Solo, ya kalau ke Indonesia mampir Solo Pak Prof Arifin.
Pasti Pak. Solo UNS itu rumah saya Pak. Universitas 13 tahun Pak.
Oh, good. Oke.
Ya. Oke, sekali lagi terima kasih Pak Ari ya. Jaga kesehatan Pak.
Pasti. Thank you.
Pak Ari, kalau misalnya mau live Bapak Pak Ari ya.
Semua terima kasih banyak ya.
Terima kasih. Stay healthy, Prof.
Thank you, thank you. Yosi mana? Thank you, Yosi.
Yoshi. Yoshi.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Don't forget subscribe. Like, and thanks a lot,